7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Right Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Jacobs. Join me every Friday at noon Eastern Time with guests who are decision makers in collegiate athletics and professional sports. Joining me today is the Director of Athletics at Bates College, Mr. Jason Fein. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daryl. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know how things can be, and it's a pleasure speaking with you, old friend. But before we get started with the Q&A, Jason, talk a little bit about your journey into collegiate athletics and why.
Sure. Grew up in New York City, as you know, where we first met, playing ball in Brooklyn and playing baseball and realizing pretty early on that I probably was not going to be a contributing player at the next level. as a freshman coach once, told me very gently, I knew if I was going to be in sports, it was probably not going to be as a professional athlete or necessarily a college athlete, but always, enjoyed. I always knew this was the field I wanted to get into. I go back to really junior high school. When I first started as a manager for our basketball team, one of our phys ed coaches that was the basketball coach, and let me hang around the team, let me do stats, let me collect the towels, do all that kind of stuff through high school. Then went into the sports medicine side of things a little bit. And when I did my grad work, as you know, I went to Brooklyn College, had an opportunity to work during grad school and really see the inner workings of what a Division III program was all about, as we brought a Division III program back to Brooklyn after their 10-year experiment in Division I. Got to be really involved with the student athletes and pretty much every aspect of an athletics department, because we were building it from scratch, which was just an amazing opportunity, kind of in the mid to late 90s. And that's, obviously when we met, working in the CUNY athletic conference. But I often joke with interns and folks that work for us, or when I do a talk for a class, saying that, the reason I became AD is because they ran out of jobs to give me, because I think I had every job you could possibly have in an athletics department, from SID to trainer to compliance to facilities to intramurals, and just, love working with student athletes and coaches and continuing to try to adapt our educational, mission as it changes and so rapidly in today's world. So I love it. A former mentor of mine always told me that he loved this business because he never had to go to work. He just kept going to school. And I love that about it.
Well, you know what? Because you had those many job titles and jobs responsibility, that's why you're an athletic director now, because you learned every aspect of running an athletic department. And that's something very key for the listeners and viewers who are listening and watching this today. Bates College is a Division III institution. Talk about athletics at a Division III institution, Jason, for you have been at several, and it's good for the coaches to know that, as well. Talk about that.
Sure. For me, I always felt an affinity for Division III, the student athlete experience, kind of maybe the last hope of the pure student athlete experience was what I found in my Division III work, especially today, right, with all of the pressures of Division I and NIL and you name it, every single thing that's going on. Division III, you had the true balance of student and athlete. It really was student before athlete. Coming up in the CUNY conference, as you know, in New York, these students were doing it all, right? It wasn't just about being a student and an athlete. They had jobs. They were taking care of families. They were a non-traditional route to getting their degrees, and they relied on us a lot to be in their lives as mentors, as coaches, as friends, as family, members. So that direct contact with the student athlete on a day-to-day basis, day in and day out, being a part of their mission and their journey and their self-discovery is something that I think that you can get it in a way at the other levels, but I see it much more holistically at the Division III level. And for too long, I think Division III was really defined by what it wasn't. Right? People always thought of Division III as, oh, that's the division without the scholarships, right? That's Division III where you're not on TV and do all that. And I think the division in the last 10 years or so has done a much better job of creating the identity of why Division III is a great institution, not only for student athletes, but for coaches and for administrators.
Well, you know what? The thing is, I'll help you out a little bit when it comes to Division III not being on TV anymore. That's all going away now with the advent of ESPN now, ESPN3 being particularly with Verizon and ESPN Plus with Disney. There's an opportunity now for all colleges, regardless of level, to be on TV, which a lot of them are going to do now as well. So any Division III players or who's overlooking Division III as a student athlete, Division threes will definitely have the TV exposures as well. Talk about some of the different experiences you had with interviewing, both as a candidate and as an AD.
As a candidate, I've been very fortunate in that I've worked with some great people and at some great places, and I've enjoyed, having the longevity there. And it's something, admittedly, as an administrator, if you're doing it, hopefully pretty well, it's not as volatile as necessarily as a coaching staff, right? Where you might be looking at a little more turnover. But what I've seen develop throughout my career is a lot more reliance on the uses of search firms, having to be in maybe a network of folks who are being pushed for jobs and feeling that you have to do a lot more homework prior to putting your name in the ring, right? Or your name in the hat. Because, there's these questionnaires and these pre-interviews and things like that. My experience, though, when they've gone best, have been where you've been able to connect personally. And that's what I try to do as an AD in connecting with candidates, especially for coaching positions. And try to get a feel for the person and what they feel they can bring to not only the institution, to the experience with the student athletes, but as a member of that community. I've gone from, big public institution in New York City to a small, private school in Jersey, and now to a NESCAC institution up in New England. Every place you go has their own different feel, has their own different needs. It's not a one size fits all thing. So I think that, we've all been in that situation, whether as a candidate where we've made a mistake and put the wrong school, we forgot to take it off our cover letter or something like that, or seen that when we're interviewing someone and say, I'm the best person for the job and they put the wrong, school. That attention to detail, of course, is important. But to me, it's really been, I've seen people survive that if you can really make a connection and show that, you understand what you're going to bring to the table and how you're going to collectively problem solve. Because as you know, as a coach, as a broadcaster, as an administrator, whatever it is, a teacher in a classroom, you can't use the same syllabus and the same bag of tricks as you used 5, 10, 20 years ago with the students as they are now, the athletes as they are now. So showing that adaptability, I think, as a candidate and also as someone on the other side who's learning from candidates, I always look at those interviews as we're learning about each other. We're interviewing each other. It's not just you trying to impress the AD or, some going a one-way solution. When it becomes a real conversation and a learning experience, that's when it works best.
What is your definition of the term right fit?
I struggle with that term so much because it's become such a buzz term, right? It's about fit. And yes, on its surface, it is. But what does that mean? To me, again, it's the ability to show that none of us are finished products, right? So one thing that I think a lot of coaches I talk to now, and administrators and staff members, there's this idea that it's a weakness to still be learning, and it's a weakness to not have all the answers, right? as an administrator, I think a coach fits in well when they see themselves as part of the team that they want their student athletes to be a part of, right? Because every team has their captains, has their quiet players that just go along, has their squeaky wheels, right? And it's the same thing with a team of administrators. When you see where your place is in that team, to me, that's what right fit is, right? And that changes based on what the school you're going to is, what the position you're going for is. Drawing that connection, that's what I see as kind of the right fit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right fit. Often when I think of that, I'll tell people when I hear the term or think about the term, I think of connecting. You making the connection somehow, some way, and if you can make that connection, that becomes the fit that they may be looking for as well. Someone said, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, I said, to me, right fit is just about connecting, having a commonality with whatever you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to get involved with. Jason, let me take a commercial break. I got to pay some bills before I get in trouble. You here watching and listening to The Right Fit with my guest, Jason Fein from Bates College. We'll be back.
The Right Fit podcast is brought to you by Rising Coaches Search and Consulting. Tired of spending what seems like all of your time and budget filling coaching vacancies? Let Rising Coaches Search and Consulting handle your next coaching search. Our process is simple. We identify, vet, and recruit a talented and diverse group of professionals that fits your institution's profile, all for a low price that we guarantee will beat our competitions. Plus, all of your searches will be handled by former coaches, meaning we will get the best possible insight on all of your candidates, and you'll get the perspective that only a former coach could provide. For testimonials, a full client list, or more information, please visit risingcoaches.com.
Welcome back to The Right Fit. I'm your host, Daryl Jacobs, and I'm here with my guest today, Mr. Jason Fein, Director of Athletics at Bates College. And we're trying to talk about the right fit, or what our definition is the right fit, and he's going to help try to bring some clarity to it from his standpoint. What are some of the do's and don'ts when interviewing? Let's talk about from the coach's side, and then if you want to share on the administrative side, because there are two different type of interviews, of course.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I think, you narrowed it down so succinctly to that word, making a connection when you talked about right fit, that it fits into some of those do's and don'ts, because I think realizing that just because your potential piece doesn't fit into that potential piece doesn't mean that all is lost, right? So I think you play into what you are really proud of is a do, and don't worry that others may see it as a weakness, or others will not embrace the fact that you're willing to talk about your mistakes. I always think that there's this, again, a need to try to be perfect on an interview. Nobody's perfect. We're none of us, and it's just as much stress on the other side when you're doing an interview, because you want to put forth a good impression to the candidates. Don't be afraid of mistakes is one thing I would say is a don't. I think that the only way we get better is by learning from our mistakes. And that's the same thing that happens, with a coach teaching a team. What I think is a do when you're talking about that is to talk about what you learned from those mistakes. How did that teach you to be a better educator, a better coach, a better administrator? And we have so many examples like that. And I think going in with a couple, everybody knows on an interview you're going to hear that, like what's your weaknesses and things like that. I would much rather hear about a real life mistake that turned into something that you learned from than those quote unquote, fake weaknesses, right? That everybody says, like, what can you say that's a weakness? It's not really a weakness. I work so hard. I work too much, isn't that? Especially in today's world, where we've gone to such a virtual society during COVID, and this idea that we're on call 24/7, we're always expected to be working. And many of us in our field, right, wear that as a badge of honor, because we always, worked crazy hours, right, as coaches and administrators. Turns out it's probably not the badge of honor that we think it is. We need to be able to show what else is important to us in life? And that's another do that I think is important. You know, we all have this intersectionality of how we identify, whether it's, you know, personally, professionally, or otherwise. Talk about some of that and how that you bring that to your work. How do you bring your full self to your job that doesn't just involve athletics or coaching basketball or whatever sport you're in? So I think it's important to you know, bring your full self to that interview, because that's what they're going to want you to bring to the, you know, to the job every day. I really think that being self-aware is important, and you know, having a high sense of kind of self-awareness, which would include things like, you know, admitting those mistakes that I was talking about, not criticizing others for, you know, things that may or may not have, you know, we know things may or may not have been your fault, but it doesn't mean that we have to, you know, necessarily have to blame on others. You know, and I think the other do that I would say is important is thinking about, how does this position look down the road? So there's going to be the immediate things that you're going to need to do. You're going to need to do your homework and ask folks, hey, what do I need to know? I would always ask somebody when I would interview for a job is, you know, what do I need to know that you're not telling me right now, right? So what should candidates know? And people always go, oh, that's a great question, right? Because there's, you know, you're putting your best foot forward, just like the institution is and the people that are interviewing you are. So I think getting as much information as possible in a unique way is another do for me. But, you know, I think when it comes to do's and don'ts, you know, you need to feel like you can fit in this place. Where they say, well, maybe you're not a fit for, am I a fit for you? Right? Does what I am trying to do in that connection, does that feel right? And ask those questions. Don't be afraid to do that. So, I mean, that's a few that I think are important.
You know, we live in a world where I see it as a big puzzle when I think of fit. And sometimes, you know, your piece may not fit in this particular part of the puzzle, but it fits somewhere in the part of the puzzle, as I mentioned. And that puzzle is society, as I tell people. And they say, you have a great way of breaking things down like that. I say, yeah, your piece fits somewhere. So don't worry about if it doesn't fit here. If it doesn't fit here, eventually you'll find where it fits. Eventually, if you stay the course as well. How is the industry of collegiate athletics changing?
What time is it? It's,
how much time we got, right?
Changed from the time we've been on this call. You know, it's changed exponentially. And I think
are you friends of Joe Clark?
Well,
Joe Clark is from the movie Lean on Me, and you know that's one of the words he used expeditiously.
I you know, I can tie that movie into this answer if you want, right? And here's how I'll do it. You know, if you're a parent, if you're a coach, you know, there was a time that in the not too distant past where when you told a student to do something or a coach to do something or an employee to do something, they did it, right? And if coach wasn't happy, well, get on the line, let's go, you know. We learned early on, at least I did as a parent, when the first time, you know, my kid got a case of the whys, but why? But why? But why? But why? And there's only so long you could get away with because I said so, right? I think that today's college student has changed so much in the need for the why, not just the want for it. They are driven by, you know, what is their purpose, right? It's not just to follow what the coach says or what the teacher says. They need that in order to be successful. And I think the best coaches are adapting to that, to be able to do it in a way that you're not giving up control of your program. You're still teaching the way that you need to teach. You're just adapting it so that, you know, the best coaches and the best teachers that I know are the ones that the team doesn't want to disappoint, right? Not just they feel that sense of purpose tied to it. So I think that's a huge change, is that why is really important when it comes to the day-to-day interaction with students and student athletes and everyone feeling that collective sense of purpose and why. The other thing that I'd say, obviously, is the business side of this. And it doesn't matter if you're Division 1, 2, or 3. Like you said, paying the bills earlier when we go to a commercial, we do broadcasting in Division 3, and we do sponsorships and commercials, and it's become a business in that way, even at Division 3. But when you talk about things like NIL, and you talk about the way that the world has become so polarized and political as far as anything we do, when you have something like transgender participation going on, and Congress is involved, and courts are involved, and everything is magnified, right? And it doesn't, in a way, you may not matter which side of any particular argument you're on, because we tend to be able to listen in our own echo chambers and reinforce the opinions that we already have. So it's hard to kind of change those opinions if you want to try to. But the business of sport, NIL side, and the politics of sport, the way that we see, luckily in the Division 3 world, it hasn't trickled down this way as much as it does from the Autonomy 5 and the power conferences, and how is our business going to look in a few years, I think is a guess. We saw the NCAA pass a new constitution at the convention this year, and now each division is working on what is the future going to be for our divisions. So it's constantly changing. But that business side, I don't know if you saw the story of the high school football recruit that an $8 million NIL deal before he committed to a school yet.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know. It's obvious that the folks that put these laws together and with the best of intentions have not realized that this has become the Wild West, and how we're going to deal with that is going to really define what the future of the NCAA and college athletics will be. I hope that what we won't lose is the mission to developing our student athletes and preparing them for life, whatever that's going to be, beyond college athletics. So it's changed so much. It's really interesting to come into work every day and realize that there's going to be some problems that you just don't have the handbook for, and you have to figure out, which way. I mean, that's exciting in a way, but it's also a little scary,
Yeah, particularly as you mentioned, the political side of collegiate athletics now is at an all-time high. I often say, no matter which side you choose, you're on the wrong side. And people say, I didn't look at it like that. I said, you will always be on the wrong side. So no matter which way you decide or how you vote or how you view things, you're always going to be on the wrong side. The business side of it, as you mentioned, has changed dramatically. With the NIL, as you mentioned, with the states passing these laws that allow the student athletes to profit off the name, and you put the whole harness on the NCAA to regulate it. They had no regulations on it. They said, hey, you know what? They're adults. We're going to make sure they're able to profit off their name, image, and likeness. You guys handle the business side of it, et cetera. But I think now, eventually down the road, Jason, I think the states are going to get back involved somehow, some way in regards to trying to regulate this. Because now, where does the taxes come out of the payments? How is this being done? Who's going to do this? Et cetera, et cetera. And, and for you guys at the collegiate level, in terms of directors of athletics, these student athletes, they're a business now. They have a business model. Their brand, they are a business. So you got to teach them how to be business people. They're running their own corporation. Their brand is their corporation, and a lot of things they didn't take into account. So my hat's off to you. I wish you guys well in that aspect. I'm always here if you need a ear to vent to. And I'm a good listener, as you know.
Absolutely.
I love this part of the show. When I get to word association, I say a word or place or thing, and you say the first thing comes to mind.
This is the scariest part of the show for me.
Absolutely not. Brooklyn College.
Oh, best times of my life.
Collegiate athletics.
Learning.
Family.
Most important.
And finally, of course, Bates College.
On the rise.
Jason, thank you for taking the time this afternoon to spend with me to talk a little about and educate our coaches and administrators and all the viewers about when we talk about right fit, you're giving them some insight of what that means. I want to thank the viewers for tuning in and listening as well. Join me next Friday at noon Eastern Time with another great guest here on the Right Fit. Until then, please be healthy, stay safe, and have a great and wonderful weekend.